This is Tornado Talk, a podcast about one of nature's most fascinating phenomenon. Share your tornado story with us by email, Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com.
That's Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com.
Now, meteorologists Jennifer Naramore and Dan Holliday. Tornado Talk is on.
The way we communicate during a crisis has evolved quite a bit over the last century. It's believed that one of the first electronic calls for help was used when a ship at sea transmitted a distress signal in the summer of 1909.
The distress signal was a Morse code sequence of 3 dots, 3 dashes, and then 3 dots again. It was referred to as an SOS.
In the 1920s, radio stations began to emerge across the country. That became a new way to let residents know about important information, including threatening weather. There were two-way communications with ham radio operators, citizen band radios, and, of course, the telephone.
The teletype machine became a vital way to get breaking news to television, radio, and newspaper and was prominent through the 1970s. By the early 80s, dot matrix printers relayed information through satellite receivers, speeding up the process of how news was delivered. And by the 90s, most of us had learned how to electronically send mail. No longer did we have to lick a postage stamp and wait days for a response. We could now send someone a message in mere seconds.
You've got mail.
For the past 20 years, our online world has grown bigger and faster than anyone could have envisioned 100 years ago. It ties us all together every day around the clock. And when weather is at its worst, the facts and communication are critical. Life-saving information is at stake.
This is Tornado Talk, severe storms and social media. Now that we've all been given the opportunity to communicate with the world when a disaster strikes, how do we do it correctly? Are there things we're doing wrong? What is the best social media platform to use? We pose those questions to a panel of social media experts.
We're joined by meteorologist Tim Ballasty, who spent more than a decade at the Weather Channel, where he launched their Facebook and Twitter accounts. Melissa Huffman, a forecaster at the National Weather Service in Houston, discusses the government's role and how social media is used during active weather.
From WBRZ-TV in Baton Rouge, meteorologist Josh Eaches. He's a PhD candidate at Louisiana State University and the founder of theweathersocial.com, where his focus is researching the best way to communicate weather information. Rounding out our panel is Dr. Marshall Shepard, the director of the Atmospheric Sciences program at the University of Georgia, host of the television show Weather Geeks Sunday afternoons on the Weather Channel, a contributor to Forbes magazine, writing a weather and climate column, and Marshall is also a past president of the American Meteorological Society.
When a weather crisis affects a community, the official watches and warnings come from the National Weather Service. Meteorologist Melissa Huffman explains what goes on behind the scenes when they need to effectively communicate to media partners and the public.
The Weather Service works within a larger information network known as these integrated warning teams, and that combines local media and local emergency management in addition to the forecast office. And we are in constant communication heading into an emergency event to make sure that we're all on the same page. People in not just emergency situations, but just in any kind of weather situation are looking for multiple pieces of information to confirm that they either need to make a decision or they don't need to make a decision. So one of the things that we use is a chat software program called NWS Chat. And so we actually have this little chat program like AOL Instant Messenger and MSN Messenger where we're talking to each other behind the scenes. So we're connected to the newsrooms, we're connected to the emergency operations centers. And so we're posting in this program what we're seeing. We're getting reports from the media, from the emergency managers. And then we're also able to let them know, hey, this situation, we think we're going to need a flash flood emergency for this. And we actually ended up communicating that in chat before the emergency went out. And that gave our media folks the heads up that, hey, we're going wall to wall with this. And that actually kind of changed the direction that the coverage during our first flash flood emergency event, which was the 2015 Memorial Day flooding. That changed the direction that went in because all of our stations went wall to wall with it and just continued to broadcast that an extremely dangerous flash flood situation was unfolding for the Houston Metro. But then from a social media approach, when you get into an emergency situation like that, it's just you are pushing out as much information as possible, taking in maybe reports that some of your integrated warning team partners are pushing out on social media, the message that this is this is a dangerous situation.
Since social media platforms can be used by everyone, we all have a responsibility. If we aren't sending information, we are consuming it. It's a learning process. And Dr. Marshall Shepard says it's what he's teaching his students at the University of Georgia.
I'm teaching a graduate seminar on weather risk communication, and we are discussing all of these issues. And one of the things that we continually keep talking about is finding the balance between the power of social media for immediacy and alerting of weather hazards such as severe weather, tornadic event, versus the sort of saturation and overhype of these events as well. I think in the net, social media is a positive tool for communicating. I think there are aspects of social media that are better than others. For example, I believe Twitter and probably Snapchat are probably the most instantaneous if you have an immediate hazard that you need to warn about. Obviously, the algorithms associated with Facebook and Instagram don't really allow for such immediacy. But at the same time, there can also be so much saturation and so many people tweeting information that oftentimes you kind of bump up against that weather signal to noise in that are you missing some important signal because of the oversaturation. So I think that's a fine line and a balance that we still are going to have to try to understand and improve upon.
WBRZ TV meteorologist and founder at theweathersocial.com is Josh Eaches. He says communicating information the correct way is most important when severe storms are threatening.
Well, my view is that we need to do it in the right way, and I think we're constantly within the weather enterprise encouraging people to follow reliable sources. For the most part, all of your local broadcasters are a good source. The national outlets such as the Weather Channel and, of course, the National Weather Service. So if you're following those accounts, I 100% support disseminating weather information on social media. I think it's a tremendous tool that we can hit folks with information on off-air times. No longer do we have to wait for broadcast to get that information across. But then the cautionary tale, I would say, that goes along with that is understanding what you're putting in that message and looking at it outside of the framework of meteorology. Look at it from the framework of a forecast user. That's the term I like to use rather than most people use the general public. I don't like that term because I'm a member of the general public. I just happen to have an expertise in weather. I talk about forecast users. So look at that warning message and think about, especially in Twitter, you have 140 characters to communicate probability, accuracy, the importance of this warning, who could be victims, who could be impacted by it, local geographical information, having a map, having a point of reference, whether it be a roadway or a local business landmark, specificity, how much detail can you cram into that 140-character message, and then perhaps reinforcement from emergency managers or the National Weather Service. And as much of that as you can get into a 140-character message on Twitter helps to personalize that threat for a forecast user. And that's what actually I think about in the split second that I have to issue that warning through Twitter or through Facebook.
Following his decade-long experience at the Weather Channel, meteorologist Tim Ballasty believes there are basics that are vital when you are the communicator and posting online. He recalls watching information coming in online during the summer of 2016 when severe flash flooding hit parts of West Virginia and Maryland.
I know that when sharing a video, sometimes just a link to an Instagram link is, when I put out a tweet and I link it to just an Instagram URL, that does not suffice. It just does not cut it in this world of very visual things. What I like to do is either take a still of a video and post it to my tweet, or I actually use a software program that creates a GIF of a video very quickly, mind you, and I'm able to play the video, capture some animation within that video, and then upload it to Twitter. It's that really captures people's eyes and lets people know the seriousness of a certain event, and in this case, a very serious flash flooding event. And so along with this visual, I also need to think about credit. I always give credit. I'm very particular about giving credit to people. I don't like when people cut and paste certain pictures or videos that other people took and just pop it up there in their timeline and without giving any special credit. These people are out there in the elements, and you want to make sure that they give proper attention, that this is their property, so to speak. So I got the visual, I got the credit, and then, of course, I want to get the location of this severe weather event. And when I can, if I have a good idea of when it happened, I will put the timestamp. If I don't have a specific timestamp, then I like to give some sort of time reference, like, oh, this happened earlier this evening. I don't want to put it out there and scare people to think that, oh, this is happening right now. I need to have some reference of time to let people know what's going on, or if it is going on in the moment, or it has happened in the past, in the immediate past. Those are some of the things that are a must when I'm putting that tweet out.
Meteorologist Josh Icha says he's developed a formal plan for how he and his team relay breaking weather events online.
I have a checklist that sits right to the right of my computer screen, and I make sure it's appealing to as many components of the extended parallel process model as it possibly can. Now, that's not something that an end user needs to know, but it's something we need to know when we're framing that message. So I make sure that there's an appeal to geography so people can personalize the threat. I make sure that the threat is clearly communicated with an image and a timestamp and for where it exists, and then I make sure that there's a mitigating action included in that message as well. So what can I do? Because we have seen through research that when a threat is communicated without a mitigating action, people will get a feeling of helplessness. This is not across the board, but if the research numbers are there, it means you're not putting together the most effective message possible. So if anything, you want to focus more on the mitigating action than the threat. And that's why I think in 140 characters, you can surprisingly accomplish a lot on Twitter. If you have an image that says tornado warning for X county until X time, the image takes care of that. You can then focus on the remaining characters to recommend what people can do to help themselves. Find shelter in the nearest sturdy building. That's just the first part of the efficacy statement. On Facebook, you have a lot more room to do that. So I make sure that we're appealing to the extended parallel process model in any tweet that is of life-threatening importance.
Some of the most important online images and video come from storm spotters who often show severe weather in action before traditional media can. Melissa Huffman explains what the National Weather Service is looking for on the receiving end so they can effectively warn the public.
There is, several pieces of information that we love to see in tweets or in Facebook posts. The first thing being the time of the report. So if it's current, put in the current time. If it happened 5 minutes ago, tell us. It's really important for us to construct a timeline as to when whatever phenomena you're reporting actually happened. The next thing is the location. If you just send us a tweet that there's a tornado or there's flooding, it doesn't really help us in going back and saying, okay, this area, we've gotten this report if we don't know where it is. So we're looking for time, we're looking for location, and we're also looking at what is the hazard that you're seeing. Is it hail? Is it flash flooding? What kind of hazard are we looking at? And then if you can describe that hazard a little bit better, how deep is the water or how big is that hailstone? That can also help us as we incorporate that into not only our data analysis, but communicating what hazards are being observed.
Time is of the essence when relaying severe weather information on social media. Are there some platforms that are better to use than others? Dr. Marshall Shepard from the University of Georgia and television host of the Weather Channel's Weather Geek Show says his first choice is an easy one.
I have a presence in Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, but for, I'd say, weather-related things, I think Twitter by far is my most useful platform. My Facebook tends to be more of a personal site for me, as well as my Instagram. I do have a public Facebook site as well. By the way, your listeners can follow me at Twitter at Dr. Shepard 2013. And I tweet information, and I will retweet and share information that I think is relevant on any given situations, whether it's an imminent threat or just general information. Generally, my Twitter site tends to skew more towards education and and scientific literacy or weather and climate literacy as it relates to these things. I'm not necessarily someone that's following every single tornado warning around the country or every single hurricane watch or warning, although I am paying attention to them.
Meteorologist Tim Ballasy agrees. For quick information, Twitter is tops.
When it comes to right now, when it comes to immediacy, Twitter is the best route to receive instant alerts about approaching severe weather. There is an immediacy with Twitter. It shows up in your your feed. You can actually, if you like a certain handle, a certain Twitter handle, you can get a you can tell Twitter, hey, I'd like to get a notification from this Twitter handle. So, for instance, if you're in Atlanta and you want to get alerts from NWS Peachtree City, well, you can actually go on Twitter and mark the notification and say, hey, I'd like to get alerts. So when severe weather is impending, you'll get an alert on your phone. In any case, that when it comes to Twitter, yeah, like I said, it's about immediacy. Facebook, of course, it's obviously the most popular. It's where millions upon millions of people are. However, they of course work on an aggregate system or a system that is not always in sequential order. So as you go to your Facebook feed, you can make it into sequential order and as your timeline goes. However, mostly people like to just have it as is, which means that you are not going to get that immediate alert on Facebook, which is sort of a drawback when it comes to using Facebook. I would use Facebook in terms of preparation, getting things, especially when it comes to weather events that are in long term, that we can see in long term, such as an upcoming blizzard or an upcoming landfalling hurricane. But when it comes to immediacy and timeliness, such as tornadoes, I would not be using Facebook to get the message out. It would be most likely I would be using text messaging alerts or Twitter alerts.
Josh Eaches, the founder of theweathersocial.com, says his favorite platform for vital information is a traditional media outlet.
I still rank television number one. I rank Twitter number two, and I rank Facebook number three. Mobile apps are probably in at number four, and if I were to round out a top five, I would say the web, a website. And the reason, again, I rank television number one because I don't think anything beats one-on-one human interaction. I mean, that's the closest we're going to, other than me being in your living room. I think speaking to somebody is the best way to reach them. If that is, a professional broadcast meteorologist should be pretty well skilled at being able to communicate that message to somebody. Secondly, I think it's Twitter, and I think I'd rank it above Facebook and the apps and the websites for simply immediacy. And again, if the message is framed properly, I think you have a tremendous capability of communicating it very quickly to somebody that their life could be in danger if they're plugged in. We encourage people here, because it's something you can do, is alter the Twitter settings on your phone to get a notification anytime somebody that's a member of our team sends out a tweet. That way it's almost like a push notification to your phone. Obviously, in tornado emergencies and flash flood emergencies, you're going to get that government push notification, the WIA. But secondarily to that, if it's even a severe thunderstorm, which can threaten a life, or a flash flood warning and not a flash flood emergency, or maybe a hurricane warning is issued here along the Gulf Coast, we encourage people to set their Twitter settings to get notifications pushed to their phone anytime we tweet something out. Yeah, sure, there will be times where it's just the day's forecast, and it may be, it's not something you need to click on, but you get to see that preview text on your phone, and we usually head it with what that bulletin is a tornado warning, severe thunderstorm warning, and that may encourage a click on to the Twitter app to see what the details of that message are and for what location it is. So that's why I rank Twitter as number two, but I still do believe that television is number one if folks have a means to turn it on and get that one-on-one interaction, hear directly from the source's mouth, that it's going to be the most effective.
Facebook may be the most used social media service worldwide, but new algorithms designed to help monetize the company limit the amount of people who can see a post. It's caused growing discontent in the weather community, especially when sending out life-saving information. Dr. Marshall Shepard believes that hurts Facebook's appeal.
I think Facebook basically has sort of shot itself in the foot as far as being useful in these more real-time situations. I mean, no matter how they tweak it, I find it frustrating not only for weather, but just in general as personal use. I mean, I barely see the majority of my friends just post in general because of this algorithm. It's, it's based on who you're interacting with the most. I mean, I actually even forget sometimes that I'm friends with people because I never see their posts because of these algorithms. And so, I don't consider Facebook useful at all for any kind of real-time weather warning at this point.
Meteorologist Tim Ballasty says he finds frustration with Facebook as well.
Yeah, when it comes to Facebook pages, I have one. It's my meteorologist Timothy Ballasty Facebook page, and my frustration is that when I publish a post, I have roughly about 1,800 followers or so. Not everybody's going to see my post that I publish, so I can see the struggles from people that are actually putting life-saving Facebook posts out there. That when you put a life-saving, when I say life-saving, I mean you're putting out there is a flash flood emergency, there is a tornado emergency, and you're putting this on Facebook. Guess what? Not everybody on Facebook is going to see that. Even if they're a subscribed to your feed, they are not going to see that immediately. They're going to see that over time, or they may not see it at all. And the only way to get more eyes on it is you actually have to pay Facebook. And in some cases, it's not chump change. It's $20, $40, and it goes on beyond that, well beyond that. So there is a huge drawback to what people see when it comes to Facebook pages.
Communication is quick on social media during major weather events. There's not much time to cross-check facts, but when the pressure is on, many people perform at their best. Melissa Huffman at the National Weather Service in Houston said she and her team members dealt with a downtown weather crisis during a major sporting event.
This was actually during the NBA playoffs. So we had the Rockets playing at home, and we have this massive flooding event that's unfolding. So we actually ended up calling the city of Houston, and we told them, hey, look, we're issuing a flash flood emergency. You guys have a lot of people in the Toyota Center, and this game is going to have to end sometime, and they're going to leave. So whatever you can do to keep these folks off the roads, let's do it. The city of Houston then worked with the Toyota Center, and the Toyota Center began advising not just fans, but actual players to stay, to not get on the roads. They kept the Toyota Center open. And then that started getting out on social media that, oh, hey, fans are being asked to stay in the Toyota Center because of this flooding situation. And it was one of those things where we used traditional communications channels that then propagated through social media to really add credence to the severity of the situation that was going on. And I think that's what people are really looking for when they're attempting to, make a protective action decision. Do I shelter? Do I evacuate? Do I do anything at all? And I think that kind of really helps elevate the event in a lot of people's minds to tell them, this is not safe. This is not a situation I want to be getting out in.
Dr. Marshall Shepard says he's happy with new ways that the National Weather Service is communicating via social media.
The National Weather Service, many of their local offices have been putting out these one-pagers with information on particular hazards or threats that may be facing their particular domain or region, or they've been putting out these one-pagers that really have very specific information. For example, I saw the National Weather Service New Orleans put out a really nice one-page slide and tweeting it out there on how the dangers of interpreting spaghetti models as we were getting into the hurricane season. I saw another office put something out on the dangers of heat in cars, and as a reminder about leaving children in cars during heat. So this is something that I've seen, and it's particularly of use by the National Weather Service. Now, I would say the National Weather Service, some would criticize them that they've been slow to embrace social media and Twitter, but I think they're coming online now, and I think they're doing a good job with those types of things. In fact, I would like to see more people following our local National Weather Service offices and some of the sort of local enthusiast sites that I see, it's a bit disheartening to see that, in some cases, some individuals have more followers than their local National Weather Service office. So hopefully we can kind of get that around. But I think as they become more active, that will happen.
Meteorologist Josh Ichis believes we've really evolved with rapidly developing technology, and that has improved online information.
We've come so far than we were 5-10 years ago, and things are much better now than they were, and messages are much more easily interpreted and easier to understand by forecast users. So I do think we have done those things well. I also think that the forecasts for these events, at least the ones we're referring to, have been great. What was it? It started as Invest 99L, and it was an Invest for so many days. And I think it did get a little hyped on social media, and people will complain about that. And I certainly had some issues with some of the types of images that are being shared, just talking about those spaghetti models and upper air charts. But the fact that it was getting attention was making people aware that there was a system out there that we needed to keep an eye on. And sure, we can look back now, hindsight's 2020, and this ended up being a landfalling hurricane, so it's good that we brought attention to that. So that was done well. If we look back to the flood event, the Weather Prediction Center had a high risk of flash flooding out 24 hours ahead of time, and that was communicated, at least I know in our market here, for ourselves and our colleagues at the other stations in town. That was broadcast over the air. If people were watching us, they were aware that there was a high likelihood of flash flooding. Now, of course, not many meteorologists I know are going to predict a record event, and that's what happened. And I didn't hear much talk of that before it happened, but people were aware we were about to have a pretty significant rain event. And then for the tornado outbreak in February, which ended up being the single greatest one-day tornado outbreak for Louisiana, that was broadcast 3 days ahead of time. There was a slight risk out and then a moderate risk, and that was reinforced day of. So the forecast is getting out there. It's being communicated 90% of the time correctly, but there are some meteorologists out there that will forget the correct way to do it right as we get up to game day.
Since anyone can create a social media account, a brand, and post weather information, it becomes more and more important to know that the source you got the information from is reliable. Meteorologist Tim Ballasty says there are tools you should use to avoid retweeting images that are not from the storm you think they are. They might be old or worse, not real.
When it comes to fake pictures, that's actually not too hard. There are several things you can use, but the main two that I use is called Google Search Image, and the other one is called TinEye. That's TINEYE.com. And it's very easy. You find the picture that you're having your doubts about, or maybe you just don't have your doubts about, you just want to make sure that it's legit. You take your picture and you upload it onto the site, be it Google Image Search or TinEye, and they'll return pictures that either look like it or are that picture. In many cases, when I see a picture that I'm kind of not, hey, this doesn't look right, I use those two services, and if they return many results, that pretty much is a dead giveaway that it's just been used before. It actually tells me when it's been used and the sites that it's been used at, so I can go and say, oh my gosh, this is the origin of this picture. That's two tools that I use for images. When it comes to video, I have to use my common sense. I don't have a lot of tools at my disposal. Video is a little bit more sophisticated. I have to use my common sense in determining, okay, how quickly did this person upload this video from the event itself? Was it immediate? Was it just seconds after? Or was it a couple days after? If it's a couple days after, then this person had time to do some things with this video and make it look like it's from a such and such severe weather event. If it's just seconds to minutes after a certain event had happened, then I'm like, okay, this gives it legitimacy, but let me go further. I think about the location. I think about the geography. I think about the landscape that I'm looking at and making sure that kind of adds up. Okay, does this tornado that hit this such and such city? Let me take a look at this city and see what Main Street looks like and compare it to this Main Street that this person says. So I just use a different lot of clues within the video itself, and then I compare with actual imagery online, and that's what kind of gives me an idea that says, okay, this video is legit.
Tim says not only are there tools to help you avoid making a mistake of posting the wrong image, but there are tools to help you improve the way you get organized with your platform.
I spent a lot of time creating Twitter lists. Twitter lists are an incredible feature that Twitter does not boast about. And when it comes to, I would call myself a power user, but you really don't have to be a Twitter power user to understand Twitter lists. Twitter lists is a way to organize your timelines into specific categories. I have a specific Twitter list that is called Westpac, and I found journalists that are stationed in Taiwan or Japan or the Philippines that are, sometimes they are international journalists that speak English, or they're Americans that are in these foreign countries. I group them into this Twitter list so I can see what's going on. So I can just say, oh, okay, there's a typhoon that's going to affect South Taiwan. I am going to see there's my Twitter list. I'm going to pull it up, and bingo, I have all the information, well, not all the information, but I can get a really good feel of what's going on right now. Let's just say, like, again, South Taiwan, by just bringing up this Twitter list. So I would have to say Twitter list is my number one go-to feature. Another feature that I use is called Facebook interest lists that almost nobody knows about. Facebook does have lists. They're called interest lists, and it's a way to categorize your Facebook feed. And you can capture, for instance, I have a Facebook feed for meteorologists, and I find various meteorologists from around the United States, and I actually bucket them into this interest list on Facebook so that I can go to it and see, okay, this is some of the important stories that these local meteorologists are telling today. So that's my second one.
Being organized is key. Having your sources, validating your information, and posting exactly what your followers want and need will certainly grow your social media fan base. Then, if the big event occurs, you'll be prepared. For instance, imagine a tornado emergency. Dr. Marshall Shepard says it is vital to keep the message simple.
Yeah, I think the National Weather Service's Hazard Simplification Project is really thinking about some of these things. So I don't know that I want to get out too far ahead of them, but I know that there is a real effort to try to simplify the message, to kind of get rid of these various layers of warnings and watches, go to more simplified messaging. I know that I've seen some recent research that suggests that the use of the word emergency really resonates with the public that maybe is not as weather attentive as we are. So I think that finding those key words that don't get saturated, don't have sort of very multiple or neutral meanings can be effective. So if that word turns out to be emergency and we sort of simplify to a set of key warnings that include emergency to get people's attention, then I'm all for it. I mean, I think that is critical. I think the other thing that really concerns me is consistency in messaging. And I see this in both social media and in traditional media, in that for, let's say, a tornado threat in a given market, you might have the same television stations giving the messaging using different colors, different language. One of the biggest things that I tried to do while president of the AMS is I actually contacted one of the largest radio television associations. I was really sort of pushing and urging them to encourage their community to, take off the competitor's hat during these life-threatening situations and try to deliver one message. We didn't perhaps make too much headway, and certainly people talk about it and say, oh, yeah, we should be doing that. And I think in some markets they are, but I think we still have a long way to go there.
Meteorologist Melissa Huffman at the National Weather Service says getting an emergency message to as many people as possible is their goal, and that means multiple platforms.
If we're dealing with an emergency situation, and we have had 3 events over the past, year and a half where we've issued flash flood emergencies. We're not going to limit that message to just one platform. We're going to try to use as many platforms as we can, as many communication channels as we can to get that message out there. But you are right in that when we're trying to provide frequent updates in an emergency situation, Twitter functions more like a news wire. So it's more conducive for us to be providing those almost minute-by-minute updates. Posts on Twitter typically have a resonance time of about an hour, and on Facebook, they last anywhere from a few hours to, could be a day or so. So you have the potential for your messages to get kind of mixed up on Facebook because of those algorithms that you talked about. But when you're in an emergency situation, in my opinion, you don't want to split hairs. You want to push that message out there as much as possible. And when things calm down, you can go back on Facebook and clean up those posts or, edit them so that it's, no longer an emergency situation to minimize the confusion post-event. But during an emergency, I'm not limiting my weather messages to just one platform.
WBRZ-TV meteorologist and founder of the WeatherSocial.com, Josh Eaches, says it's important to remember the information people need and don't need during emergencies.
The biggest problem I have with meteorologists and their use of social media is the amount of science we're blasting out there during these events. A quiet, calm weather day is the time to educate. A life-threatening situation is not the time to show some deep-in-the-weeds forecast model or a 500 millibar image or even discuss what you're seeing as a trend on a visible satellite picture, the formation of an eye wall and things like that. That's not the time to share that type of information. That just muddies what's an already cloudy water in a time where every single message on there has the potential to influence the decision somebody's making. So I really hate to see meteorologists sharing the spaghetti models and the spaghetti plots. I hate to see information going out there that shows upper air charts, vorticity maps, even in some cases, precipitable water values and things like that, which were being shown during the flooding event. Show yes, it was at a record level, but what can a forecast user do with that information? Not much. So I just don't see those events as the time to share that type of information. And we talked about this on the Weather Social, but there will be times where somebody that's not directly dealing with the situation, for instance, I was in Baton Rouge, some meteorologist in another area of the country, National Weather Service broadcaster, whomever it may be, may share their scientific take on the situation, and that is no different than armchair quarterbacking on Monday morning after the game and second-guessing the coach. It only clouds up a message that local forecasters trying to issue to their forecast users. So that's my number one pet peeve. And I think a sub-point to that is a lot of times you will see meteorologists that work with the National Weather Service or work with a private forecasting company, an AccuWeather or WSI, and they're sharing a lot of these technical images, and that's fine, but what they may not realize is they have more novice weather users following them that don't understand this information, or they might have other meteorologists that follow them, and then that gets retweeted, say by a broadcaster, and then it reaches the eyes and the end users, the forecast users that don't necessarily know what that means. And I think it leaves up a lot of room for interpretation that really shouldn't be left up to a non-meteorologist. And it also leaves room for false alarms and for warning fatigue and things like that. You got to be careful with the information we're putting out there, especially in times of significant weather events. I think we need to take a step back and look at the framework of when these messages are going out. There's a time to educate, and there's a time to show how much you know about the weather by showing an upper air chart, and there's a time where it's just about those messages that people can use to make decisions that could ultimately save life and property.
Some of the most fascinating coverage of a weather emergency is watching it unfold with live video. Facebook Live and Periscope have opened the door for that. Meteorologist Tim Ballasty believes it is an important part of social media's future.
I just see more and more people from the public are going to start using Facebook Live and Periscope to show severe weather events as it happens. Even if they're not safe, if they're safe, it's just the nature of what this brings to people. It brings this opportunity for people to post something live on Facebook or on Twitter, and I think you're just going to see this grow and grow, so that when there is a landfalling hurricane or a blizzard happening, you're going to see a lot of this happening in real time, and you're seeing it happen when it comes to major events around the world, be it terrorism or a major earthquake that has happened, and I think you're just going to see that as various weather events that happen in the United States. Perhaps we have a landfalling hurricane this year. aside from Hermine, that you're going to start seeing more and more people start using these ways to show people what's happening in real time.
The television host of Weather Geeks on the Weather Channel, Dr. Marshall Shepard, says Facebook Live and Periscope are not his favorite tools to watch because everyone can broadcast live. He does find value in them, however.
Yeah, I'm actually not a big fan of Facebook Live. That might come to be a surprise to you. But I think the reason that I am not is because I just see a lot of my Facebook friends kind of abusing it. I really don't care to see one of my Facebook friends Facebook living from their daughter's softball game or something. That's just not something I'm interested in. So I think because of the usage like that, I've just become oversaturated with it. But sure, I could certainly see how in sort of a real-time weather situation it might be useful. And we've toyed with it a little bit with the Weather Channel and Weather Geeks and the shows that I'm involved with, both Periscope and Facebook Live. So yeah, in more media, real-time alert situations, I certainly see the value of it. So I won't sit here and kind of say that I don't see any value in it, but I guess I'm a bit biased because I've been so oversaturated with what I would say are not important and more trivial uses.
In episode 4 of Tornado Talk, we look back at the devastating tornado that struck Joplin, Missouri in May of 2011. Rebecca Williams and her daughter Genevieve, who lived just outside of Joplin, were responsible for creating a Facebook page to keep the community connected. She says social media is important, but it's not the only element needed in the aftermath of a disaster.
You must rely on all forms of communication. Social media is just a piece of the puzzle. You need everything from television to AM radio. You need flyers. You need your town crier. You need it all. But in this day and age, social media emergency management is an excellent tool for so much of situational awareness, recovery, resilience, rescue early on, volunteer management. It's just a priceless infrastructure asset that's part of the picture.
What do Joplin Tornado Info's administrators post today?
We post amber alerts, silver alerts when senior citizens are missing. Sometimes we post wanted criminals. But it sounds as if, why would a tornado page do that? Well, we're a regional page, and we have a large following, and any time that there's some kind of crisis in the community, someone needs help, we post that. We post weather information. We certainly don't want people to rely on our page as a weather source, but we do post, predictive indicators of severe weather coming up in the near future. We don't start sensationalizing that because so many people in Joplin do have PTSD. But when it's within 24 hours, we'll start posting those things. We do our best to post watches and warnings in the area. It is a volunteer group, a volunteer effort. Steve Douglas, who is an amateur weather meteorologist, weather follower, does a really good job of staying up and doing his best to post.
This brings up the subject on how social media should be used in the aftermath of a weather disaster. All of our experts agree that Rebecca and her daughter's creation of the Facebook page was brilliant. Founder of theweathersocial.com, meteorologist Josh Ichis, says his studies have shown how effective a community page is.
What's fantastic and disaster research has shown that after events, community leaders often have some of the best resources in terms of reaching people. You just gave a great example there, but I have found that here in Baton Rouge, after the flood, our city's social media accounts have become much more active, and it's the information that people need. Just for instance, each day they're posting an update as to what neighborhoods they're going to be in with their trucks to clean up flood debris, and that's what people want to know, even more so than this was a 1 in 1,000 year rain event. That's great, but it has no value to people immediately when they're trying to clean up and rebuild their lives. So I do think, and this is something that could certainly be instigated or initiated by local meteorologists as they're connected with the weather and often connected with emergency managers. The National Weather Service is working with communities to instill a social media plan. And we do that here, and I think many regions of the country do, at least from the weather enterprise level, do that through integrated warning teams. But many have not yet ventured out and included community leaders in those workshops. And I do believe that's the next step, is inviting mayors and emergency managers, deputies, and their city-level workers, and not just parish and county-level workers, into these meetings as well, just to build that network out.
Dr. Marshall Shepard says his colleagues are studying storm aftermath communication and science.
We actually had one of my colleagues here at the University of Georgia, Dr. John Knox, and some of his students actually worked with a woman that produced a Facebook page to help people retrieve items that were blown away in the Birmingham or the Tuscaloosa, the Alabama tornadoes from several years back. So I think that was a very excellent use of the format, because it allowed people to go onto that page and say, oh, there's my family picture, or there's my family heirloom that was blown away. But interestingly enough, Dr. Knox and his colleagues were able to take items that were retrieved via that Facebook page, and were able to do some really nice scientific analysis of the path and of the storm, and how far away debris can be lofted or carried based on tornado damage. And so if your listeners are interested, that's some very interesting work by Dr. John Knox and his colleagues on debris tracks and lofting based on a Facebook page. So it has sort of a benevolent use in allowing people to find things that they hadn't been able to find, but it also has been shown to have some scientific use. I will say even researchers now are starting to use Twitter and Snapchat and Google as well, going back to look at sort of the data and analytics associated with these social media sites to see if there's any thing that can be learned in terms of improving our warning of these systems.
Melissa Huffman at the National Weather Service agrees about the importance of community keeping in touch following an emergency.
The first thing that I think is on any meteorologist's mind following a disaster is, are people okay? So I think there's going to be just a real human element that comes out from the weather community of just trying to figure out what happened and just, really making sure that the folks in the impacted communities are okay. Once you kind of move past the initial shock of what's happened, I think, the weather community needs to work with your local preparedness groups or state, federal partners in pushing out, response and recovery information. A disaster is not something that people deal with every day. And so little things like, let's say you're returning home after a tornado and you smell gas. Do you recognize the real safety issue that poses? Do you know what to do? So I think that's really where the weather community can step in and say, hey, we recognize that this bad thing has happened. Here are some tips to help get you through it. Because people are looking for information and how to recover from an event. And then the weather community's responsibility in, providing, current and forecast information doesn't end after the event's over. You still have response efforts that are going on. So we still have to be there providing that forecast information so that the, first responders or those people beginning cleanup operations are aware, hey, you know what? Round one is over, but we're looking at, maybe another system impacting this side, or, hey, everything should be okay. You shouldn't have anything that messes up your city's response operations. So I think in terms of, providing that preparedness information and providing that, current and forecast information, that doesn't end once the actual disaster has passed.
Meteorologist Tim Ballasty says no one knows a community better than the people who live there.
It also reminds me of what Google actually has done in the past, and they continue to do it this day. You just don't hear as much about it. It's their Google crisis page, and it happens after a devastating earthquake, especially I think they actually recently used it during the Italy earthquake of just a few weeks ago. It has all the information that you really would want, Google Maps, Red Cross setup stations and stuff like that. I see Google crisis pages set up during forest fire in Southern California, perhaps. You see that happening where you say, okay, this is where evacuees are heading to. This is the shelters that you need to get to. This is where the fire is right now. This is where it's expected to grow. Anyway, I've seen those pages. So when it comes to a community like Joplin, putting that page together, that sounds like a brilliant plan. It kind of grows the community. It lets people it's run by people that are familiar with the community. It's not run by outsiders. I can see how that is going to be completely beneficial, not only for, the survival, but also, like I said, the community aspect of things, and just saying it's a place to go so you can actually feel like you are in the know.
What is the future of severe storms and social media? Snapchat has soared in popularity with teens and young adults. Because messages are limited and they disappear, its use in life-saving information is not certain. Melissa Huffman at the National Weather Service in Houston believes that Snapchat may be best utilized by communicating educational weather messages. Everyone agrees on one thing: communication via social media is not going away.
I think one of the things that the weather community will have to grapple with, though, is emerging platforms. 10 years ago, Facebook was really big, and that's what, a lot of the younger generation, the millennials, were really, jumping onto. But now, you're seeing 5 years ago, Twitter gains prominence, and Twitter is still big now, but you have other emerging platforms like Periscope, like Instagram, like Snapchat, and I think we're going to continue to see social media evolve over the coming years, and so that's just going to have to be something that the weather community has to adapt to, is how do we get our message out, whatever platforms come up.
Do you have a story about tornadoes you'd like to share? Let us know, and you'll be featured on a future program. Just email us at jenanddan@tornadotalk.com. That's jenanddan@tornadotalk.com. Next on Tornado Talk, October 4th, 2013, 18 tornadoes tear through northeast Nebraska and western Iowa. An EF4 hits the eastern side of Wayne, Nebraska, causing damage and injuries. What happened in Wayne on episode 22 of Tornado Talk.